Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Switched Online webinar. We will be starting very shortly as we just let the last couple of people come in and join us. Okay, I think we're ready. Let's make a start. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Switched Online webinar, where we'll be talking about quick wins and real savings. Making IoT work for social housing is today's topic. My name is Michael Poynton. Oh, sorry, no, housekeeping to start with. So my name is Michael Poynton. I'm the delivery director at Switchy, and big thank you and welcome to you today. Please feel free to ask any questions throughout the webinar, and you'll find a Q&A box in the top right of your screen. At the end of the webinar, there'll also be a short survey, and please do take the time to answer that for us. It massively helps us continuously improve and assess the quality of the content today, but also starting to listen and hear from you on what you'd love to hear us talking about next. Our next Switched Online webinar it will be coming and be announced at the end of the webinar today as well, which is this is our webinar offering, and we run them every month. All webinars can be found on our website as well, so recordings are there for you to peruse at your leisure. As I say, welcome to today's webinar on quick wins and real savings. Before we dive into the presentations, we're going to capture some insight from the audience and ask you to poll questions, which we'll then use as a bit of a feedback loop. Firstly, a bit of an introduction to myself, and then we'll jump into the poll questions. So as I say, my name is Michael Poynton. I'm the delivery director at Switchy, and I've been with Switchy for a little over 5 years. And my remit encapsulates the end-to-end customer journey. So this starts from managing our supply chain, but more relevant for today's session, it includes our installation journey, the professional services that we offer to our clients, the support services that we provide to our residents and our clients, and our amazing customer success team designed to minimize the time to value and maximize your return on investment. If we strike a chord during today's webinar, or more generally you'd like to pick my brains further, please do feel free to reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me by typing in my name into LinkedIn, or you can use the QR code showing on the screen in the bottom right. I would love to hear from you, love to talk to you, and if as I say, if there's anything that you particularly like to hear more about, or you just generally want to pick my brains, please do feel free to reach out. Today's topic is all about identifying some quick wins that you can get access to with our technology and the real savings that this can help unlock for our clients. And ultimately, we've got 3 aims for the session. One is we're going to talk about deploying transformational technology with strategic intent. We're then going to focus in on some of the quick wins that we think we can help you unlock and how this can generate real savings for you as a business. And then we're going to briefly touch on the technology adoption journey and how that looks. And the best ways in which hints and tips we can give you for that technology adoption journey. Before we jump into the meat of that, we're going to ask you 2 quick poll questions. So fingers at the ready. And if you could please pick one of the following answers that will be shortly showing on your screen. The first question we've got for you is, when purchasing Internet of Things technology, we consider the payback return on investment during the decision-making criteria. Should have 5 options on your screen. Strongly agree, agree, neither agree nor disagree, disagree, or strongly disagree. The votes are rolling in, which is great to see. Thank you very much. Lovely. Give that a couple of seconds more. I can see we've got just over half the people that have attended have now voted. Would love to get that a little bit higher if we can. There we go. Great. Okay, lovely stuff. And then the second question we're going to ask you is, we track and monitor the return on investment from our IoT purchases. So we're looking for this after you've made that purchase. Are you actually tracking and monitoring this? And the answers to these questions are yes, against a pre-agreed set of metrics, retrospectively, or when we get asked to, based upon sentiment, or no, not at all. We don't really track it once we've made the purchase. Amazing, votes are flooding in, great news. Awesome, good spread. Okay, so we get a mixture there of some people not at all, which is absolutely understandable. Others, when we get asked to, or retrospectively, yep, that makes perfect sense as well. And in some cases, great organization up front and a pre-agreed set of metrics. Really great to see and hear. Cool. So we're gonna jump into the meat of the webinar now. And the first thing I was going to share was, so we talk about transformational tech and how Switchy potentially is a player in that space. Prior to my time at Switchy, I came from an FMCG environment, and one of the guiding principles of the organisation I used to work for was we manage our costs tightly to free up resources for top line growth. And it's a principle that stuck with me to this day. And as part of preparation for this webinar, I spent a bit of time reimagining this principle for social housing and how that might look. And to be honest, I think you can quite easily tweak that principle, and yeah, it makes perfect sense for social housing, which is we manage our costs tightly to free up resources to enhance and improve resident outcomes. It's fundamentally what we're trying to do here at Switchy, and hopefully you are by considering the investment in and deployment of IoT. It's also something that would resonate with you. It's one of the sort of core principles that we use as a business, and tracking that return on investment is something that's really impactful and important to us. So why Switchy? Well, we believe we have a transformational piece of tech. With its integrated sensors, its hugely strong resident use case. So it's the fact that it controls resident heating and hot water means it's got genuine credibility and reasons to be in a resident's home. And the plethora of other benefits, such as the messaging capabilities and beyond. So it's a transformational bit of tech because it sits really nicely in the home, and the resident acknowledges and accepts it as being commonplace within the home. But more importantly, to get the most out of that investment, it's really important that we consider deploying it with strategic intent. So how does the client who's buying it, how do they get the most from that? And that is, for us, looking at three fundamental principles. What does strategic intent mean to housing? Well, firstly, it means we need to look at the people. Who's living in your home? How many people? How do they live? We've worked with clients that have segmented their residents into 4 to 8 different demographic groups according to their wants and needs for their housing, and deployed their IoT in line with those demographic groups. Conversely, we've worked with clients who have never done this, and we've been able to work with them to help them build this. From an asset perspective, we look at the physical asset itself. So what archetypes do you have as a housing association? What works have been done to that asset throughout its life? And we typically recommend a spread across at least your major archetypes to ensure you're getting a representative picture of your stock. And thirdly, you've then got geographical location. So where in the country are you located? The southeast of England, by and large, has very different external environmental conditions to the northwest of England or the far north of Scotland. So it's really important that you take account of all three of those elements when you're looking at a strategic deployment of IoT. We believe that you have to look at the intersection of all three of these points to make sure you are perfectly positioned to set yourself up for success, because it's only by building that strategic longer term picture of looking at the people, the asset and the location that you can actually start to unpack real strategic decision making for you as an organization. But we also understand that getting to that point can take a lot of time. You can't go into 10, 15, 100,000 homes overnight, and that takes time. So today we're also focusing on what are some of the quick wins that you can start to realize from a deployment of IoT. I can't stress enough that operational change takes as much time as the physical deployment itself, and therefore changing your processes and your ways of workings has to take precedent and priority. And so we're here today to share a few of these with you and talk to you about some of those use cases. So moving on to our second topic, the 3 use cases I'm going to talk to you about today are some of the quick wins that we can help you access straight away. So the first one is first-time access rates. So that's how we can help with our technology to improve the first-time access rate within your properties. The second is damp and mold causality, and how we can look at what does the data tell us to inform you the potential cause of things like damp and mold in the home. And third is looking at voids and abandonment as an insight, and how we can help you identify properties that are potentially not being lived in, and help you maximize your assets and minimize the turnaround time when properties become vacant and empty. So we're going to jump into each of those. I'm going to explain a little bit about what each of those insights are, and what the typical results have been as part of that, how it works, and what are some of the quick wins that can happen from within it. So first-time access rates, what is it? Well, essentially, it's reducing the frequency and financial impact of our smart appointment scheduling service. How many of you incur costs or have contractual clauses around no access? If you're using third-party contractors, it's likely that they'll have some no access fees, or the number of times they'll attempt to gain access before it comes back to you as a problem again. How many of you count the cost of the time spent by your teams trying to gain access to properties at inconvenient times for residents? We believe, for example, that every single resident no access is a loss of in excess of 60 minutes of productive work time for housing associations. That can come from your support teams, that can come from your contractors, but essentially there's at least 60 minutes of productive working time lost as a result of a no access. So we aim to solve for that, and that comes via the Switchy device and also via our smart appointment scheduling feature. So how does that work in practice? Well, a very quick flow chart of how that works. What I've done here is the overall first-time access we believe can start to be a quick win from the off, but we've also demonstrated a few elements that are quick wins within this as well. So we start with occupancy trends. The data that we collect from the device can enable us to learn the optimal times when a resident is home. This is completely optional, but you can look at when are they typically home based upon the interactions with the thermostat, based upon responses to messages, and also looking at the other sensor data that exists within the device. We can also collate resident preferences. So as part of our messaging and communication protocol, we can actually ask them, would they like to use the device as a communication tool? That can massively streamline the operational impact and the costs associated to you as a client, because you don't necessarily have to send letters, you don't necessarily have to send texts, and you can really implement smarter communication protocols via the device. We can then help you schedule appointments, and that can be done based upon your team availability. So let's say you're a housing association officer looking to do your annual tenancy reviews. What days of the week are you looking to go and do those? We can just directly use that availability to help you schedule appointments with your residents. You can look at the resident preference. So if you wanted to use the optimal times for the resident, you can look at that, or you can stitch together a combination of both. So when are your team available? When does the resident want to be visited, and see what the overlap between those is. And you can use our smart appointment scheduling platform, which essentially enables you to self-plan those visits and then also provide real-time data back, which we can then report back to you on the success rate of that. What you then typically happen is, so you'll schedule those appointments via the messaging features. 24 to 48 hours before, that resident will then receive a nudge reminder via the device again, and that will also solicit a response to confirm that it's still convenient for them, that appointment. If not, we can then cancel and reschedule it. If they confirm it, then you're good to go. You complete those appointments as usual, so business as usual operations thereafter. And then using our platform again, you can log in and you can essentially quickly and easily report whether you've been able to gain access to those properties or not. And it enables real-time reporting to help drive efficient workflows. What we've seen as a result of that, so the results, we've been piloting this with a number of clients. One such quote here comes from Tony from Hague Housing. Switchy is a good way to communicate with our residents. We get responses straight away, and we've received in excess of 98% access rate when we've arranged to visit tenants via the Switchy device. Bearing in mind that our broader research suggests that the first-time access rates are anywhere from 60 to 70%, this is a transformational route to gaining access to resident properties. And we believe it to be due to the fixture of the Switchy device in the home, the fact that people rely on it and trust it as a reliable communication source, and the fact that it's an ever-present part of their home. It's very easy to ignore a letter, an email, or a text message. It's not quite as easy to ignore the messaging functionality on your device in your home. So we do believe that scheduling around the best times for the resident and in line with what works for the client can have huge potential impacts and benefits. The results so far, so the way we typically track return on investment with our clients is we look at the time savings, we look at the financial savings, and we look at the carbon savings associated with that in tons of CO2 equivalent emissions. So we can do this on a per property basis, and we can say that on average, based on missed appointments and that 60 to 70% average first time access rate, there's a saving of 20 minutes per property. That's based across a full deployment as such. There's financial savings. So if you can imagine starting to do this for your annual gas safety checks, your annual tenancy reviews, and any repairs appointments, there can be huge potential financial savings as a result of that improvement. And then also carbon tons, and that comes as a result of emissions through not wasting mileage of driving to appointments and not getting access. And then you can start to see how that scales. So if you were to deploy that across 1,000 typical Switchy installs, you then start to get to 300 hours of potential savings, over 100 grand or £114,000 worth of financial savings. and then also quite significant carbon ton savings. So we really look at it across those three lenses because we think those are the three driving factors for our housing associations and our clients. Essentially, everyone would like more time in the day, everyone would like more money in the pocket, and we're all trying to work towards a better future with lower CO2 emissions, and therefore this is an added bonus of things you can track. So we think it's a relatively quick win because the moment Switchy devices start to be deployed, you can start to tap into this capability. And yeah, we've seen huge positive success rates. Some clients have managed to maintain a successful streak of 100% access rates. Others, as with Tony in this case, we've had a 98%. So we're delighted by this as a feature and a function and a capability, and something that we continue to roll out with a number of our clients. The second one we talk through is damp and mold. And for us, this comes both in the presence of the device itself, but also looking at the causality elements, and specifically one of our latest innovations, which is called HomeScan. What we do here is we're looking for the time, reducing the time to fix and the frequency of visits through enhanced damp and mold causality information. So how many of you find yourself visiting and returning to the same properties over and over again? One client we work with has told us that in excess of 3,000 of their properties had 5 or more repeat visits over a 3-year period with regards to intervention works for damp and mold. So as you can see, that's driving significant cost into them as an organization. They are, every time they're sending someone there, it's incurring some form of cost. And what if we could more efficiently tackle some of that, so you can actually treat the root cause in the earlier visits to the property and actually then try and mitigate some of those repeat visits moving forwards. Environmental monitoring and our sophisticated damp and mold algorithm can help you reduce the time to fix and the number of repeat visits typically encountered by most residents suffering with damp and mold. So we can significantly reduce that, and we can help you identify the root cause, and we can try and do that as fast as possible. How does it work in reality? Well, back to our process flow again, slightly different flow this time, but similar number of steps. You install the Switchy IoT. You can do that based on, we would hugely encourage it in line with the strategic objectives we outlined at the start of this webinar, but you can also specifically hone this in on damp and mold. So we recommend that you target that deployment to be the active damp and mold cases you've got at the moment, or if you really want to go slightly more granular, what are the repeat damp and mold cases that you've got? So how many properties do you have where you're going 3, 4, 5 times to those properties, and where could extra information help you understand what's going on in that home? Once the sensor's installed, you can then start to build that baseline data out. So you're collating sensor data from 5 different sensors, plus any ancillary sensors that you might deploy to the home. You can capture further information with messaging surveys, so you can start to understand resident behaviours, resident trends. Are they able to afford heating, for example? And you can then start to get that reporting back out of the device. That feeds into our HomeScan report, and you can start to analyse the results coming from that HomeScan report. That thing looks at things like mold risk, and it looks at the reasons why we think there may be a higher mold risk in these properties. So you can segment the properties that are affected by high, medium and low mold risk, and you can then start to see what is the data telling us in terms of suggestions on the causality of that. This can help you with more efficient diagnosis, so it can help you understand what do we think the potential causes are, and help inform those very vital first actions that you can take with those residents in their homes. You can then continue about your business as usual operations. So you schedule works, repeat visits to those properties. If you want to, we also have a network of subcontractors that we manage and maintain, and you can help deploy them to facilitate some of the works if it's mold intervention works. You can then, once you've had those first intervention works and those visits, you can then also track and monitor what's been the impact. So you've got 24/7 damp and mold risk follow-up reporting. So you can start to see, let's say you've done a ventilation intervention, new vents have gone in. You can actually start to see, does the mold risk start to come down on the back of the intervention works that have happened? And you can also follow up directly with the resident. So again, you can use our messaging protocol to see via the Switchy messaging, have the works been successful in their opinion? How did they find the nature of the works as well? So you can collect as much or as little feedback from the resident as you'd like, which can also lead to more efficient case closures. So you can use the messaging protocol to close cases down, which can in some cases also save costly and time-intensive processes of contacting residents. So we've got a few quick wins dotted around that as well. What do the results look like? Well, this is on the left is some of the outputs from our HomeScan report. So this was taken from I think a 3,000-4,000 deployment of devices. Some of the results up here from middle of winter last year as an example. And this is what HomeScan starts to inform you of in terms of primary actions. This can then help inform your surveyors of things to look at when they're moving forwards, help with some of your resident liaison officers so they know whether some of their residents are struggling, whether their heating systems are working in the way that they're supposed to be. So we really try and bucket it down, and you can then target different areas of your business with the necessary actions that are required to get these properties working the way we'd like. One quote we saw from a customer was, using Switchy data, we're able to reduce the number of repeat visits from an average of 6 per property to 3 per property. So I'm sure you can imagine if you're saving 3 visits per property, you've got quite significant financial savings that start to become appropriate with that. So not only is that persistent and repeat costs of intervention works, but there's also potentially mitigation in terms of future disrepair claims and also future remedial works that may be required if the conditions continue to get worse in the home. In numbers, how that breaks down and equates. So look, if you're saving those 3 visits, quite a significant time saving you've got potentially per property. There's quite significant financial savings at £2,796 on average per those properties impacted. And again, carbon savings as a result of those repeat visits that are being mitigated. So that can all roll up quite nicely into a 1,000 typical Switchy install route of, again, best part of 100 grand's worth of savings, 840 man hours or person hours that are saved on the ground, and over 4,300 tons of carbon. So 4.3, sorry, apologies for that, but really significant savings across the board. And as I say, we really like to track this in terms of time, cost and carbon with our clients so they can directly track and monitor the impact of the works they've had. Thirdly, we talk about voids and abandonment. What are voids and abandonment? Well, roughly 5% of the properties within social housing each year become void, and roughly 0.2% of properties become abandoned each year. So there's quite an opportunity to detect occupancy and help minimise void turnaround times. The average void turnaround time is in excess of 10 weeks. And abandoned properties can go on for quite a while before we understand and subsequent disrepair costs can then rack up on the back of that, or costs of making the homes noteworthy to live in again. So our aim here with this insight is to reduce the time to identify voids and abandoned properties through the use of our occupancy indicator. How does that work? Well, similar to the other deployments, you start with the deployment of Switchy, and you can configure alert parameters as part of that. So you deploy the Switchy in line with whatever the business objectives are. Statistically, they're quite, as I say, 5% are likely to become void at some point over a rolling 12-month period. You can configure thresholds for void reporting. So typically we set a medium and a high threshold of 2 and 4 weeks, but you can change that. And that basically means you're going to get a medium void alert at 2 weeks and a high risk of void alert at 4 weeks. That can then generate auto reporting. So that will generate alerts for you that say there's a medium and high risk that these properties are void or abandoned. You can then confirm that, again, using our messaging capabilities. So really looking at the thermostat as an integral hub in the home. You can confirm that via messaging. That can give you occupancy via that messaging features. So you can say, is there anyone home? If you don't get a response, that can then lead to escalations. So you're not immediately defaulting to someone needs to go and visit this property, or even someone needs to call this property. You try and solicit a response to start with via the message. If you don't get a response in an appropriate amount of time, it can then lead to escalations and further follow-up calls and or visits to those properties. That follow-up visit looks like in the form of a welfare check, or it can involve things like mobilising the void and abandonment proceedings for your organisations. What this can typically do is significantly shorten the time to discover abandoned properties. So some cases rent will continue to be paid, but properties have been abandoned, and we can significantly help reduce that time. And it can also help with resident welfare checks. When we've been talking about this with some housing officers, some of them who police their patches pretty tightly know when residents who typically never go away, they would have cause for concern if their residents were not mobile, for example, or those that regularly go off on holiday, and those that therefore they'd be less concerned for. So you can start to look at different ways in which you can configure these alerts by properties moving forwards to help people manage their patches more effectively. The results so far, well, we've had a couple of great quotes back from some customers, potentially really useful for welfare checks on our residents. As housing officers, we know that certain residents are more likely to be out. Never go out, so setting different thresholds across our patch could be game changing. Or alternatively, we had another client talk to us and say we were able to identify a property that had been vacant for in excess of 250 days. Without it, we would have never been none the wiser. So we've really helped sort of on both fronts, so from a welfare perspective and also with actually identifying abandoned properties. Again, that can lead to modest time savings per property in these instances. So when you look at this on a per property basis, the time savings aren't huge and neither are the costs. But when you then aggregate them over time or scale deployment, they do start to stack up. But also it really helps manage your operational processes. So at what point does your voids process kick in? And how can you reduce that 10-week average void turnaround time down and the savings that you might be able to unlock from getting residents back into new homes sooner rather than later to minimize the turnaround times. You know when that property becomes empty, and you know when you can start to mobilize on the void process that you've got in place. So they're the quick wins that we typically talk through and some of the things that we can start to deploy with our customers off the bat. And we also like to talk about the technology adoption journey as well. So as part of this, we understand that technology adoption takes time, and we understand that that isn't always the easiest thing to mobilize in organizations that can be hundreds of, if not thousands of employees large. So the first thing you've got to do as part of that technology adoption journey is identify your advocates and your allies. So who are the people, the change makers within the business, the people that are really up for doing things differently. What's really important is that you can identify those people and try to do things different, and those that want to do things differently. Find those people, and you're one step further along for unlocking success within your organization. Some of our best results have come from people looking to do things differently. They have then sponsored small trials, and that has quickly scaled into bigger and better things on the back of the success that we've been able to unlock. Some of those use cases have been some of the quick wins that we've gone through today. The second thing we really advise is to stop thinking and start doing. So it's easy to say we're going to deploy this. It's really easy also to do nothing with that. And we think it's really important that you just get cracking from day one. So even if you've only got one single point of contact across a team that wants to do something differently, work with them, and you'll start to quickly see the positive results that come off the back of this. And then that can quite quickly lead into things like scale. So how do you deploy to a broader set of the organization, to more homes, and unlocking bigger success for you within your IoT transformational journey. One word of warning that we also like to give our clients is that typically there are two process routes that are required from the initial deployment of IoT. You have to consider what is my journey with and without switchy technology at this place. So IoT deployment can take time. In some cases, it can take in excess of 10 years to get a bit of kit installed in all of your homes. And if that's the case, and the timelines you're working towards, you really need to think about your operational processes and how you can evolve those to say, okay, do I have switchy technology or other IoT provider technology in the home at this time? Yes or no? And therefore, what's the process I can take with that one? Or no, I don't have it. And what's the processes I have to do with this one? You can then also start to benchmark the differences between those and start to see the savings that come on the back of that. But really, it should be helping you on that transformational journey. But you do have to give that some fair thought and consideration up front. Typically, we look at our return on investment as well. So as I've sort of talked through in some of the slides today, we look at return on investment in terms of time, cost, and carbon. But ultimately, priority number one has to come in the improvement of resident outcomes. So that's ultimately why we're all here and what we're passionate about here at Switchy. But we're also looking for savings for our customers. And primary metric for us is financial savings on the back of that. With our various plethora of use cases, we've got proven theoretical savings of 3 to 1, so which means that every pound you invest in Switchy, you'll typically get a £3 return on investment over that 10-year horizon. But we're also looking to continually innovate with our clients, and therefore we work towards aspirational savings longer term of 5 to 1. So we're never satisfied with what we do as a core offering. We're always looking for ways to improve both our processes, but also the future use cases and additional things that we can start to deliver with our clients. Ultimately, the conclusion here is that return on investment is super important for us, as we know it is for you, and it's something we like to track as closely as possible with our clients to make sure that they're able to achieve that maximum return on investment, which both starts with those quick wins at the outset, but then also can quickly move into those operational plans for the longer term to make sure that you are actually able to drive operational change from within your organizations. So it's something that we man-mark very hardly, and really, yeah, we look to work as closely as our clients would like to in order to track that and be able to demonstrate that value back to the organizations as part of their journey with us. That brings us to the end, sort of short, sharp, and quick on the webinar series for today. I do want to open the floor at this point for any questions, anything that's piqued your interest as we've gone through the webinar today, anything you'd like to know, please do feel to fire them in. Going to have a quick look. One's just popped through on my screen. How quickly can we expect to see a return on investment from installing Switchy devices? So typically we track return on investment over a number of years. We typically have a payback period where we break even within the 3 to 4 year territory. What we do is when we're embarking on an outset journey with customers, we actually look at, we collect a bunch of data from you in terms of what's your anything from the number of active damp and mold cases you have, the cost of intervention works, but we have basically an industry set of averages which we use, but we will then default to client data if it's available. From that, we're able to articulate return on investment calculations, and that comes in both time, cost, and carbon, as we've gone through in terms of the webinar today. And yeah, that payback period typically lands in the 3 to 4 year territory. It depends how quickly you think you can go as an organization with driving operational change as to whether that can be shortened to 2 year or in actual fact it's likely going to be 5 years. But we look at it as a maximum theoretical saving that we can offer at the outset, and then we look at the operational plan to get you there to sort of elongate that or bring it forwards depending on where you think you're going to get to. You can only go as quick as you can, so we really want to work closely with clients to make sure they're able to unlock the best return on investment as part of that. Next question. If I do have other questions, I can't see them on the screen. Oh, wait, here we go. Nope. Any other questions? Where's Wandry going? How early can Switchy detect damp and mold risk compared to traditional inspections? So our mold risk indicator takes effect at about 30 days after the Switchy install. So we typically would like 30 days worth of data before we're able to give you an accurate reading on mold risk. It's something we're looking at the moment as to whether we can shorten that process, but typically where you start to get real value from the data that it's collecting is 30 days post date of installation. Obviously, mold risk has got a seasonality element to it. So typically mold risk is higher in the winter months when it's raining and there's more higher humidity on the ground and temperatures typically are lower. But yeah, within 30 days, you typically start to see mold risk, and then you also can start to gain access from that home scan reporting and really start to tap into some of the causality elements of what we're doing there. Good. Done that one. Once installed, can the resident tamper with the technology? I would say depends what you mean by tamper is the honest answer to that question. So the resident interacts with the technology, right? The touch screen that I've showed a couple of times through the presentation is there and is designed for them to interact with it. We also have backup and override capabilities on the receiver unit that is installed in the home, and that's in the unlikely event of a failure. So they can interact with those. In theory, someone could unscrew it from the wall. That is possible, but we don't really find that is a problem at all. So yeah, they can tamper with it, but it is not something that we see as a predominant use case across the homes, and is not a huge risk factor at all for us in terms of scaled deployments of the technology. Very happy to answer any further questions on that if you'd like to. If there's any more that you'd like to know, Rob. If there's anything specifically around tampering that you're most concerned with, again, would be very happy to answer you on that one. Any other questions. We sometimes have an issue with residents turning off fans if they think they're costing too much to run. Are they able to disconnect the switchy unit? So the only way they'd be able to disconnect the switcher unit, so we have 2 approved routes for installation. In 90% plus of installations, they are hardwired into the mains, and that is therefore connected to the boiler. So the only way they could turn them off is if they turn off the boiler at the same time. In the other 10% of use cases, it's typically because it's a retrofit into a property and the wiring is not sufficient to be hardwired in, at which point you can use our plugged adapter. In that case, yes, in theory, a resident can unplug that and you then start to lose some of the capabilities from the display. But in reality, that's a very low proportion of residents where that happens. You mentioned ventilation fans there. We've also recently announced a partnership with Ventaxia as part of that, which we have a mechanism called Z-Wave pairing within our tech, and that enables us to pair with the Ventaxia latest variant of their fan, and you can actually start to ingest data also from their fans, so you can then start to see whether a resident has turned them on or off. So assuming that you had a hardwired solution, for example, where it was connected to the boiler, you'd either know whether the resident has turned the boiler off or whether it's connected, and you'd then also start to be able to ingest data from the fans, and you'd therefore be able to see whether they are in fact running their fans and at what operational speeds, and typical humidity readings, not only where the switch is installed, but what's the temperature and humidity in the kitchen or bathroom where that Ventaxia fan is installed as well. So we're sort of really quite passionate about building that connected ecosystem and trying to minimize the financial outlays as part of that for the housing associations. So that's part of the innovation that we've brought to the market as part of that. Do you get much pushback from residents who are wary of smart devices? Good question, David. No is the short answer. We do not get much pushback. I'm not going to lie and say we don't get some. It is on probably less than 1% of cases where we get questions and queries on that. We are quite open about this on our privacy policy. We direct residents to our privacy policy on the very first page of our resident user manual, and it is also available on our help menu, which is directly found on the displays. Some cases there are residents that are slightly wary of them, but generally speaking, with some well-placed sort of commentary around what you're trying to do and why you're doing it, it allays most of those fears. Typically, I'd say that if they've got a smartphone, that smartphone is doing more for them than what the switchy thermostat will. Ultimately, there are 5 sensors in the thermostat, and they're there to protect them and the home for the long term. There's a legitimate interest to collect that information, and we're really looking to use it for good. And as I say, less than 1% of cases we have an objection, and then we're usually able to overcome most of those objections through a bit of well-timed commentary to the resident as to why we're looking to collect this information from them and what's the benefit for them. Ultimately, it can lead to cheaper bills from them, especially if you're using it around retrofit projects. It can lead to better outcomes. So the idea of having a resident mobile app where they can control the heating and hot water when they're out and about is quite appealing. They've got a 7-day programmable thermostat, and actually they can also schedule appointments and things at their convenience than traditional methods, all typically used as plus points to them as opposed to negatives and detractors. So yeah, that's that one. David, I've got a second question for you, but I think that's as an add-on to your question. So yeah, just considering trust issues between residents and housing providers, I think you're spot on in that. And yeah, it definitely takes a bit of time to build that. I think what we typically see is once switches are deployed to residents' homes, when people start to use that communication protocol and they start to feel the benefits of doing that, actually they build better trust with that. We've got an 85% plus resident satisfaction rating for the installation of the devices in people's homes. Every install that's done via our trusted installer network has a CSAT survey sent to them, and that's what enables us to give us that CSAT feedback, and that is typically 85% plus. Question from Philip here: how can switchy support in the deployment of devices? What methods of deployment do customers normally use? So we can, well, firstly, you can install them yourself, but also I'm very conscious that some cases bandwidth is a limitation and speed of deployment might be a priority. So we've spent a lot of time over the last 2 to 3 years building out our trusted installer network. That is initially it's a network that the seed of that came from the idea of installations and trying to shorten the route to market for our clients. So we've built a network that fully covers the Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And we install on clients' behalves as part of that, pointing through our network of subcontractors. We manage the project management side of that, so we will manage the deployment and the installation as part of that with our clients and keep them informed every step of the way. But what we've seen through the success of the creation of our trusted installer network is that that's also led to further services as well that's come on the back of that. So as part of that, we've started to branch out, and you may have seen things from Switchy in the past talking things like Mold IQ, and that's where we're looking to connect, use the smart data and use that causality piece that we've talked about as part of HomeScan, but to deploy that and potentially connect them with other subcontractors to perform corrective works, be that ventilation assessments or surveys to understand what that looks like. What methods of deployment do customers normally use? We're about 60% of our customers use the Trusted Installer Network at the moment, and 40% continue to do it themselves. It is a combination of what the priority is for them at this moment in time. So if it's a retrofit project, you really want pre and post data, so they'll typically deploy the Switchy Trusted Installer Network as part of that, because it gets us collecting data prior to the intervention works that are due to happen on those properties. If it's boiler replacement program, they may already have contractors going into those homes, and therefore they'll typically deploy them themselves. So it really depends what the options are as part of that. Can you go into more detail about the ventilation monitoring? What sort of data do you see? Joe Lloyd. Joe. So it's a partnership we've announced with Ventaxia. So their latest, I think it's called the Revive 7, their latest ventilation system is wirelessly paired to our thermostat, and basically we start to ingest data from the thermostat. So within there, they've got temperature and humidity sensors, so they can ingest the environmental conditions within the home, which will be able to also give you an element of mold risk indications in the kitchen or the bathroom whenever those ventilation systems are installed. We'll also be able to we also can ingest the run speed of those fans. So you can determine whether it's connected firstly, so whether it's actually switched on or whether it's been switched off. And then you can also start to see the run rate and the flow rates coming out of the fans as part of that. So you can really, you can track what's going on with that ventilation system and if it's being used effectively or not. You may also be able to track running hours as part of that. So you can then start to see, is it due an intervention or potentially a clean scheduled maintenance visits on the back of that as well. So it's a partnership in its early days, but it's due to go to mass production, I think, later this month, but I could be wrong in that, so don't hold me to that one, please, Joe. But generally speaking, we're very excited about this because it's fans have to be installed as part of building standards, obviously, and therefore we're quite passionate about it because it's not pushing significant additional cost onto the housing association, but it's enabling you to build a better picture of what's going on in the home, and then you can really start to understand whether it's people, assets, or location that's potentially the driver of your issues that you might be trying to deal with. Hope that answers your question, Joe. If not, please do reach out to us. Because we're happy to field some more questions about that and talk to you about that offline in some more detail. Kevin Lees asks, what are the 5 sensors monitoring, and is there only one number device per property or multiple monitors per dwelling? So within the Switchy head unit itself, which is the device I've displayed during today's questions, it's got 5 sensors. So we've got temperature, light, humidity, pressure, and you've put me on the spot and now I've forgotten. Motion is the 5th one, sorry. So that's the 5 sensors, and they are all contained within the Switchy head unit. We believe that a single point of sensing is sufficient in most cases, but we also acknowledge that people may look for additional data from their homes. So that's why we've got the Z-Wave chip built into our head unit, and that enables us to wirelessly connect and communicate with other sensors in the home. So we've also got a suite of other sensors and a full connected ecosystem that enables you to get different levels of reporting and monitoring of things that interest you. So we can deploy battery or mains wired additional sensors that can be deployed to other rooms, and they can be anything from VOC, PM 2.5 to just simple temperature and humidity sensors. So you can start to ingest information from other rooms if you know you've got pain points that aren't where your thermostat is typically installed. We also have energy clamps, and those energy clamps typically enable us to track and monitor energy consumption or energy production. So if you're installing solar PVs and you want to know what your solar PVs are generating, you could install an energy clamp there as part of that. Or you can track consumption via different energy circuits in the home, so you can start to see whole home energy usage or even different subsets and circuits as part of that. So typically as standard, we only deploy a single sensor, which is the Switchy, but depending on the nature of your deployment, we've got you covered in most instances. As I mentioned, the Ventaxia fan, we've got other things in the works as well that we'll be announcing in due course that will start to broaden that ecosystem. And our overarching principle, as I say, is really we're not trying to add significant cost into the housing association. So we're typically looking at existing infrastructure that already exists today, and therefore how can we integrate with that or piggyback on the back of that, which is where the partnership with Ventaxia came about. Hope that answers your question, Kevin. Do feel free to reach out if you've got any further questions. How many housing providers are Switchy currently working with throughout the UK? We've got a customer base of in excess of 130 housing providers across the UK. So hopefully that answers your question, Rob. We're always looking for more, so do feel free to get in touch if there's anything you'd like to further discuss with us. And we genuinely believe that some of the things that we've gone through today can actually help the broader ecosystem that supports housing as well. So if you're a contractor and you're working in and around resident properties, I can imagine you've got quite an invested interest, for example, in improving first-time access rates, because that may be adding significant costs to your business as well. So it depends what the interest is there as part of that. And then another question from Joe. Could you cover this briefly, but could you give some info on the interface between resident and how that's typically used? So I might just click back a couple of slides just to throw the interface up. Let's go near the start. Apologies. So that's the typical interface a resident will experience. They control their heating and hot water from here. So you've got the plus and minus button, which is how they control their heating. You've got in the bottom right corner, you've got the hot water. So you can toggle that on and off for hot water. You've got the settings menu in the top left, and that enables you to set the programmers up and also pair with your external sensors or with the smartphone app as part of that. So that's the basic setup and how the resident configures that. And that's typically in the winter months, they're pretty much at that device every day, interacting with it because it's controlling the heating and hot water. We've got a help menu in the bottom left, and there you can receive the Switchy help menu contact details. But as part of that, in the next couple of months, we'll also be you can also direct them to your help centres if needed. So that will become a customizable menu, and that will be during the next couple of months. The other interaction, the key interaction that I talked about a few times today, is the messaging element of it. So you've got the messaging envelope in the top right. You've got an LED on here that will flash at the resident actually. So if there's a message pending on that device, you can either set it so it takes over the screen, so they've got it on the screen displayed in front of them and there's an LED flashing at them, or you can minimize that. So if you just wanted to send information to the resident and they interact with it at a time that's convenient for them, you can disable the LED so it doesn't flash and it also doesn't take over the screen, and then it's just a case of clicking on the emblem. The quickest way to get that response is to have it as a prominent update tool, which is the LEDs flashing at them and it takes over the screen. So it depends what's the urgency and what's the need for why you're communicating with that resident as to how that works. But yeah, that's typically how it works. That is all done via our platform, and we've got two routes to doing that. We try and support our clients by helping them manage campaigns. So we set campaigns up within our portal and you can deploy them to devices at your will. That can be all of your devices, or it can be a subset and a cluster of those devices. And there's ways in which you can segment those clusters of properties. And also our smart appointment scheduling actually uses a slightly different interface because we're trying to make it as efficient and easy as possible for those that are interacting with it and trying to schedule appointments en masse. So we've got a slightly different UX for that, but ultimately it's something we'd be very happy to take you through, Joe, if you wanted to reach out on a call as part of that. Question from Kevin: have you worked with grant providers for private properties? By grant, I assume we are talking about sort of government grant funding as such. We have in some instances we do have some presence in private properties, but typically we are 99% plus focused on social housing. I would certainly be interested in hearing more, Kevin. So if you do want to reach out, feel free, and we can talk some more about that, and I can connect you with the right person for it. We have been grant funded in a number of instances, so we do qualify as part of Eco4Works. We do qualify as part of Warm Homes Works for funding to be deployed. So there are many routes in which we can be specced in terms of funded initiatives. There might be some sticking points around the privacy elements of it or the private properties there, but when there's a will, there's a way. So I'm sure we'll be able to find a way to make that work if you'd be interested in talking more, Kevin. Cool. I think we are mostly through the questions now. No more questions is what I've just been told. It's great. So a big thank you, and I'm just going to zoom to the end again. A couple more slides just to close out today. So yeah, as I say, any more questions or anything you'd like to know more, please connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll happily either answer the questions myself or point you in the right direction of who may be better placed to answer those. We'd love to invite you to our next webinar, which is scheduled to be on the 21st of October. And timely, it's seamless, as if we've set this up. We'll be talking about Ventaxia and the Switchy partnership. So as part of that, we'll be looking at mold management with smart ventilation and how that is all going to work. So if you, Joe, I think it was you that asked about this, by all means, please do register for this webinar on 11 till 12 on the 21st of October. Please scan the QR code and that will take you to switchy.com, and you'll find all of our webinar series on there and any recordings from previous webinars that are there, and you'll also be able to register for the next one on there as well. Finally, it's a big thank you for joining today. Please do take a moment to complete the survey, which will appear on your screen when this webinar ends. We do really use that to help drive improvements for us in innovation. So love to hear your feedback on how you found today and what things you'd like to see more of or less of in the future. Thank you very much. We will close it there.